Welcome to the Empowering Women podcast. Together, we will hear from ambitious and inspiring career women as they share their stories of success and overcoming career challenges. And now, your host, Mel the Engineer.
Hello, and welcome to the Empowering Women podcast. I am your host, Mel the Engineer, and on this show, we feature powerful women leaders working in male-dominated spaces. Our guests have overcome a variety of hurdles on their path, but they each share a passion for giving back to community and helping other women achieve their career ambitions. Today, we're speaking with chemical engineer and remediation expert Jackie Sailing. Jackie has over 17 years of experience in environmental consulting and is a registered professional engineer in the state of Michigan. Basically, Jackie helps orchestrate large-scale hazardous remediation projects like contaminated soil and groundwater remediation. She has responsibilities that span client communication, leading teams, and developing sound technical solutions. She is awesome. There are several things that stand out to me about our conversation today. Jackie shares her philosophy on the intertwined nature of work and personal life. She shares her own journey in learning to accept help, particularly from other parents, while she's raising her two daughters. And she also highlighted an excellent story about learning that one of her direct reports' reputation was not consistent with reality, and then how Jackie could become an advocate for this employee so that she can move up and achieve her own success. At the end of our discussion, I'll rejoin you to talk about some special announcements, particularly the upcoming conference in September. But really quickly, before we dive in, I want to let you know I did have some minor sound issues on this episode. I've done my best to cut out any static and level the volume, but if you've got issues with the episode as you're listening, I do sincerely apologize, and I'll do my best to make sure that doesn't happen again. So without further ado, I bring you Jackie Sailing. Welcome, Miss Sailing, to the Empowering Women podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome. So I would like to ask you to tell us a little bit about what you do right now, just really short, and what your area of expertise is.
Sure. So right now I work for our Cadis. It's an engineering and design firm. I work in our environmental business line. My area of expertise is in remediation. I'm currently our practice lead for the remediation community of practice in North America. In addition to that role, I also am a program manager for a whole bunch of really complicated active and formerly active chemical sites here in Michigan. And then I am also have been a staff manager for quite some time, and I think that about covers it.
Awesome. Okay, so let's back up then. How did you get into this field? How did you get into engineering and remediation specifically?
Well, so I went to the University of Michigan, and when I kind of was getting into college in high school, I was good at, math and science, and I really loved chemistry. So I thought that I wanted to be a chemical engineer. And when I got into chemical engineering, I realized it had a lot less to do with chemistry than I had anticipated. But I got through all of the really hard classes like thermodynamics and fluid dynamics and thought, well, I got this far. I'm just going to tough it out and make it through and get the degree. But I didn't think I wanted to be a chemical engineer. So I actually also got my teaching certification while I was in college because I was convinced that engineering was not for me and that I wanted to be a teacher. So when I graduated, I didn't throw engineering completely out. I interviewed for both teaching positions and engineering positions, and I had kind of two offers on the table. One was to be a high school physics teacher, so I got certified to do chemistry and physics for high school, and then the other one was for this environmental consulting firm, and I had no idea what environmental consulting was, but I really didn't like physics. So I decided I didn't want to be a physics teacher and I'd give this environmental consulting thing a shot. I have no idea why this firm hired me because I had no idea what they did. But luckily, I got into it. They had to teach me everything, but I'm just the type of person who likes to learn and take on new challenges. And I kind of hit that place at the right time. They had a lot of remediation projects going on, and they didn't have really any entry level or junior level engineers to get those projects going. So they all came my way. So that meant I got to do a lot of things I was not qualified for right out of the gate. I got to go out in the field and I got to see and operate a lot of remediation systems themselves. So actually, you know, turning on equipment and taking measurements and things like that, which really I had no experience with before. But I worked with a field technician very closely and kind of he showed me the ropes and how to use tools and all of that. And it was an awesome learning experience. And I also got to start doing design really, really early. Also, something I was entirely not qualified to do, but I kind of went into it with the mindset of I've got, a degree in engineering. It's not environmental engineering, but a lot of the stuff I learned in my chemical engineering classes I could apply, and it made a lot more sense to me in kind of these real applications at work, and I loved it. And so really I spent the first 5 years or so mostly splitting my time between the field where I was watching the things I was designing be installed or operating them and understanding how they worked, and then also coming back into the office and working on design.
That sounds like an amazing first year. Did you have any regrets? Like were you wishing that something had worked out on the teaching path, or were you kind of set with your new path?
I was totally set with my new path. I think it made me see engineering in a completely new way. I think I'm a very hands-on person and I loved my time at University of Michigan, but everything was very theoretical in the learning process. We had a couple labs, but even that wasn't applicable to real life scenarios, or at least I couldn't connect it to a real life scenario. So kind of everything seemed to come into place. I got a lot more confidence in my technical skills and just, seeing that I could work through these problems myself was a huge kind of growth for myself in those first couple years in work.
When you were in school, do you remember roughly what the male to female ratio was like?
Interestingly, chemical engineering, when I was there, was pretty half and half. So in my chemical engineering kind of class, it was 50-50. So I really didn't appreciate when I got into the workforce that there was kind of a imbalance in terms of that ratio. And it wasn't until I started working that I started recognizing that there were very, very few women in kind of the industry that I was working in. And even the ones that were not usually very technical in nature. So it was kind of a culture shock going into the workplace from sitting in college and having, just as many women as men in my classes.
So how did you navigate that, and how did your career progress after that first position?
So I worked at a couple small consulting firms for the first 5 years, and really what kind of prompted me to leave both of those places was I didn't have people to learn from. I felt like I used the mentorship that I had there and to a point where I had kind of gotten up to a point where there was no one else to teach me what the next step was. after 5 years, I interviewed at our Cadis, and I had all these reference books, right? So I wasn't an environmental engineer, and so I had been gathering these reference books and using them to teach myself how to do this, learn about environmental engineering and design and things like that. And so I came in here to interview, and Fred Payne, who writes a lot of the books that I had, happened to work in the office that I was interviewing in, and he handed me his book and said, you should really come work for us. This is my new book, Remediation Hydraulics, and I sit right here in Novi, and I was like, well, this is where I need to be. These are the people I need to learn from, like the people writing the books about remediation, which was my passion. So that's I've always kind of looked and strived for people to learn from, and I've been at Arcadis now for 12 years, and tons of people here that I've learned from along the way.
Let's talk about remediation in a little bit more general terms. So for somebody who's outside of the environmental engineering world, what does a career in remediation entail, really?
That is a good question. So I guess the easiest way to describe it would be kind of cleanup of contaminated soil and groundwater. Many of our clients over their historical operations may have released chemicals into the environment over the years. A lot of the times they didn't recognize that these chemicals could be dangerous to human health or the environment at the time that they were using them. So they may have been in the environment for decades at this point. Accidents happen and things get spilled. So really what our job as remediation engineers is to assess what the contamination is, where is it, what are the sensitive receptors, and what is the best way to clean it up so that there is no more risk to human health and the environment.
And what are the spectrum of clients? Because you mentioned chemicals, but it's not just chemical manufacturers. What is the spectrum of different types of clients that you would work for to perform remediation activities?
Yeah, pretty much anybody who makes things that we use. So manufacturing clients, automotive clients, aerospace, the government. So a lot of the Army bases and Air Force bases have a lot of contamination from their activities, chemical clients, pharmaceutical clients, pretty much, like I said, anybody, oil and gas. So anybody who makes stuff that we use is typically using chemicals or things that you don't want released into the environment. So I work for the gamut of pretty much everybody.
So let's talk a little bit about the intersection of sort of work and personal life. So I know that you're married and you have kids. Would you feel comfortable sharing anything about how your career progressed while you were having a life on the side? What does that look like?
It is hard, and I would love to talk about it because so I worked for about 5 to 6 years before I got married. And so kind of got to know my husband while I was kind of part of this career. I was traveling a lot. Like I said, I was going out to sites and be out in the field, so I would be gone for weeks at a time. So he kind of knew that I was really into my job and liked what I was doing and that it involved travel and things like that. We got married and continued to work. And so when we decided to have a family, I didn't really appreciate kind of this idea of being a working mom or what it all would entail. So after my first daughter was born, I actually, not up front, it wasn't until I was ready to come back to work, realized that it might be a good idea for me to come back part-time. And so I remember coming back to work and sitting down with my supervisor at the time and kind of my main mentor, who I worked mostly with, who were both men. Both actually had stay-at-home wives with kids. And so I was expecting this conversation to go in a certain direction, them recognizing that their wives like to spend time with their kids. So if me asking to work 32 hours a week, I was like, this is going to go great. And I remember saying it out loud, and they both just stared at me with this blank look on their face. And we're like, why would you want to do that? And, I was just shocked that they wouldn't recognize that, as having a baby and it being a new mom, that kind of gradually coming back would be something that I would want to do. They saw me kind of in the before kids way. So luckily we worked that out, and I was lucky to have a flexible type of job where I could do 32 hours a week. So I basically didn't work on Mondays and then worked, 8+ hour days for the rest of the week. I also remember, coming in on a Tuesday one day early and talking to somebody by the coffee pot and saying, oh, Tuesdays are like my Mondays because, I don't work on Mondays. And they looked at me and said, oh, geez, how do you get that deal? I remember thinking, I take a 20% pay cut and I still do all the work I was doing before. I don't know if I would consider it a deal, but
right.
So those, it was different. It was not what I expected, but I think I was really diligent about sticking to the 32 hours as much as I could and not letting that float to, from week to week and get too out of control. So I had my second daughter about 2.5 years later, and I came back and also, stuck to that 32-hour a week schedule for a couple years. But within 2 years, a pretty good opportunity came along for a leadership position, and I decided if I was going to be a working mom, and I was going to have 2 girls, that I wasn't just going to have a job to have a job, that I wanted to have a job that and kind of take on leadership roles, advance my career, really have a career. I didn't want to just have a paycheck. If I was going to go through all of this, it was going to be something meaningful to me. So I interviewed for a leadership position and I got it, and really recognized taking on that role that I wasn't going to be able to do it if I was part-time. I at that point went back to full-time and have been full-time ever since. But I am so lucky to have my husband as a partner with me. I think that is so important, and I can't stress it enough. He has supported me in every crazy thing I've wanted to do in my career. He's got a very, very lucrative career himself, but we just work together. We communicate. We make sure our travel is not overlapping, and we also have, luckily to have our parents can help us out, and family nearby who can help us as well. I think I've gotten to a point where I have really no shame. If somebody's going to say, hey, if you ever need help with something, just let me know. They mean it, and I will ask them to help me. And they're all, people are always happy to help. I'm supported not only by my family, but even my friends and my kids' parents and moms who maybe don't work. They are more than happy to help. So I'm just really lucky to have such a great supportive kind of network around me to allow me to do all the things I do at work.
I think those are some really excellent observations you made there. I wonder if you might comment a little bit more on your personal philosophy about the partnership that you have with your husband and how that enables you both to pursue your careers the way that you want to.
Yeah, it's incredible to me when I look at what we have versus, when I see other people and kind of the lack of support that they have at home. So I'm just so thankful that, and it's interesting, my husband actually comes from a very conservative small town, and I wouldn't have expected him to be as supportive as he is. I mean, I think I knew that deep down when I married him, but it's just been so amazing that, so he works out of the house now, and he does travel a lot, but when he's home, he basically gets the kids to school, picks them up from school. I really don't have to worry about any of that stuff when he is home, which makes a lot of the stressors when you're sitting in the office and worried about, oh my gosh, I have to get somewhere to pick them up. I know it's taken care of. And just that alone is a huge burden off of myself that I know a lot of other working moms carry that full load all the time. And I couldn't imagine having to be the one who drops off and picks up every single day and to still have to get all of their work done between kind of when school is in session or daycare is in session. So, he's there to help drive and take people to where they need to go after school. And then, supportive, like I said, I've done so many crazy interviewed for so many crazy positions and taken on a lot of roles that take a lot more time than I may anticipate. And whatever I have to do for work, he picks up the slack, and I do for him too, right? So he travels a bunch. He actually just got back from China yesterday, so we work it out, and it means I really couldn't do it if I didn't have a supportive partner like that.
You're listening to the Empowering Women podcast.
I really appreciate you sharing that. Are there any other thoughts you might want to share about the community aspect that you mentioned, kind of having this group of supportive people around and recognizing that what you said, when someone offers to help, they really do want to help?
That took a long time for me to recognize. It also took a long time for me to recognize. So it's interesting when if you have kids, you start and you send them to daycare, and all of the parents who send their kids to daycare are all generally, working parents, and you're all in it together. And, you all got your hair on fire, but you're kind of all in the same place. And then it wasn't until I sent my kids to school where you start interacting with a whole different group of people that you didn't even know existed, right? Where maybe they don't have two parents working, and one of the parents stays home or is part-time. And those are the people who are around school a lot more, and they can be more active in the school and are doing more things. And, originally those type of people made me feel bad about myself because I couldn't contribute at school the way that they were. I couldn't volunteer. I couldn't, be the Girl Scout leader or whatever it is because I just didn't have the time. And then about a couple years in, I started reflecting on that and thinking, instead of just feeling bad for myself about that, I need to feel thankful for those people. I need to support those people. Maybe I can't support them with my time during the week, but figuring out in what ways I can support them. And once I kind of changed my perspective a little bit on that, it was life changing. And then that's where kind of that whole community came into play, where I realized these people want to help me, and I want to help them. And so when they offer to help, like we've had this crazy winter and we've had 3 days off school this week. And, one mom was like, hey, bring your daughter over here for the day. I know you have to work. Would that be helpful? And it was like, yes, I will bring her over whenever you can take her. So, just saying yes to the help, and in turn, figuring out what you can do to help somebody else. And it's really, I'm really lucky to have found a really supportive community at my kids' school, as well as I'm lucky to have family who live very close to us as well.
Yeah, I don't know what you think about this, but I tend to feel like as much as we might want to talk about a separation between our work and our personal life, that's just not reality, because these things are intertwined and we do need support sometimes, and that can look like a lot of different things.
I think somebody once told me, like, work-life balance, that's not really a thing because it isn't, when you think about balance, you think one side or the other, and it's just not at all that, right? It's very much intertwined, and
Yeah.
yeah, there's going to be times where you have to focus on your family and you have to put your job kind of aside, and that you got to make sure you can prioritize that. And then there's going to be other times where, you got to ask your husband to step up because you've got to go and work a week, and that's going to be okay too. And the other thing, kind of, my kids, so I've got two girls, and we talk a lot about leadership. Something else that I love about their school is they do a Leader in Me program, and so they're always talking about leadership. And so, if we get into this thing where, oh, mama, you have to go work and this and that and the other, we always have a conversation about it that are around, what is important for me, why is it important that I work? And, I make it clear to them that, again, I'm not just working to have a job. I'm working because I think it's important for them there to be women leaders in engineering fields, which is what I do. And so we talk about that a lot, and then they get that leadership messaging reinforced at school. I'm hoping it's resonating with them. I don't know yet. We'll see. I think that's another kind of important aspect of kind of that intertwining between work and family, and instilling things into my girls that I hope that they take with them as they grow older.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I want to go back to what you were saying about maternity leave and then coming back part-time. It sounds like you were able to navigate that extremely well and keep yourself on a trajectory towards leadership. I just wonder if you've got any other thoughts on what you might recommend to other women who are trying to navigate something similar.
So I think what happens, particularly like right when you come back from maternity leave, is you become extremely efficient, right? You only have so much time to get stuff done and to be productive, and then you're going to go home and it's going to be chaos, and so not only do you become super efficient, but you can also, I feel like my spidey senses for looking for opportunities were way more in tune, because I recognized that I couldn't waste my time on things that weren't going to give me payback in the end. And I also knew enough when it wasn't the right time to reach out for something, that it would be overwhelming. So it was a balance between recognizing when I just had to like put my head down, get through and work on what I'm working, versus when I was ready, but keeping my feelers out, right? And making sure people, because that's the other thing, is a lot of times you come back from maternity leave and people assume, oh, she just had a baby, she's not going to want an opportunity like that. Like, so you have to be a little more proactive about, still taking things on that you can manage, to make sure that those doors stay open and people don't see you shutting doors, and being kind of open about that, but also not kind of crashing and burning. It's really hard to kind of walk that line. So I think in the end, I navigate definitely between my two kids. That was my time frame of just put your head down, you know, try to make sure people know you're still around. But I didn't really take on a whole lot in those kind of years between kids. It was kind of when I came back from my second daughter that I was a little more proactive about making sure people recognized that, I was interested in doing more, taking on different roles, raising my hand for things. And, that was really kind of how I navigated that. But it was not easy at all.
Yeah, I hear you. Were there any specific advocates or mentors that you had along the way that helped you with your path? And what did that look like?
Yeah, I think from a remediation perspective, when I started at our Cadis, there was one guy in particular who I worked with very closely for the first probably 5 years. And he really helped me network across the company and set me up significantly for a lot of the roles that I've taken on subsequently because I mean, as you know, in our industry, it's networking is probably the most important thing. So the more people you know, the more people you've worked with, the more people who trust that you're going to do a good job for them, the better. And so that was huge. That kind of really kind of set me in the right direction straight away here at our Cadis. And then there's been various women in the technical leadership at Arcadis that I've had the pleasure of working with and kind of in those key years when I was struggling with coming back to work or working part-time or, this thing called work-life balance that doesn't actually exist, having people like that to talk to and, talk through, how did they navigate it? And a lot of time it was older women whose kids were, in high school and were going through things in a completely different time. And it was just good to hear their perspective and how they navigated it and kind of how I could take pieces of that and pull it into what I was doing. So I would say there's been a variety of people along the way and people come in and out, as my roles change. And I've just been really lucky to have a lot of good advocates and mentors in my career.
What have you encountered as a woman in this field and in this industry that has been difficult, and how did you get around it or overcome it?
I think for me, it was, I don't want to use the word confidence because I don't know that that's the right word, but I became more recognizing, like I said, when I came out of school, it was pretty 50-50. And so when I got plopped into this industry and every meeting I was in was, all men, or even when I started working with clients, all the clients that I work with tend to be men. It was finding my voice, I guess. I always had all these thoughts and ideas and things to contribute, but for whatever reason didn't it took a long time for me to feel comfortable that I could contribute to the conversation in the same way anybody else could. And I don't know why that took me so long to get over, but I think, and I don't know if it's a male female thing, but it was a huge kind of hurdle that I had to overcome. And now I feel like maybe I've swung the other way and I say everything and it just comes out of my mouth. But I find that, you know, if I'm thinking something or wondering or have a question, you know, for a long time I thought, oh my gosh, if I ask that, everybody's going to think I'm stupid. But now I realize if I have that question, there's 5 other people on this call have that question. So I'm going to ask it. And, most of the time when I do that, I'll get IMs or texts. Oh, thank you so much for saying that because I was wondering the same thing. So that was a big hurdle for me, and I think, I mean, from a female perspective, it's the family thing. It's hard. You feel like you're being judged when you go, when you're leaving early from work to go get your kids, and then you feel judged when you go to pick up your kids and you're the last one to pick them up from school. Again, that was when I had to really kind of think about how I wanted, change my perspective on everything. And so what I try to do at work now is we have a women's network here where we talk about things like that. And I want to kind of try to get the stigma away from the workplace on things like that. And I hope it's working, and I feel like it is. Maybe I just don't care as much anymore. But, we have a lot of young women and men too, right? That's my favorite when we hold a women's network kind of, I don't know, meeting, and I've got some guys show up who are new dads, and they want to know what they can do to help. And so nobody should feel bad about having to take off at 4:30 if you have to get your kid by 5, because we all have laptops, we all have cell phones, we're going to get our jobs done. We can get online and do it after dinner, after the kids are in bed, and we do. I think that's always really hard, navigating the work life stuff.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that It's slowly getting better, and there is still some of that old school kind of mentality that has lingered where, 50 years ago in engineering, I'm sure it was well over 90% men, and most of them would have stay-at-home wives, and so the culture could be very easily that, you can stay at work and do those things and not have to worry about kids because someone else at home is taking care of making your meals and picking up your kids and making their meals and washing their laundry and all that sort of stuff. But
Yep.
that's just not realistic in the world we live in today, where in most couples, both of them have to work. So
Yeah. Yep. That reminds me, laundry. I We lived in our house for 3.5 years before I ever even learned how to use our washing machine because my husband is the laundry man. So that's amazing to me.
Well, I think that's a testament to you making a choice about your partner that I would love to see more women having conversations about that and what that maybe could and should look like.
Yes.
Okay, so I have got a couple of the things I want to get to with you today. You have received some recognition in the last year for something that Cadis is doing, a pro bono contest. I would love it if you could tell us about that contest and about your project that won.
Yeah. So this is kind of interesting in that our CEO, he sent out an email. So this would have been in the fall of 2017, kind of introducing this idea of a pro bono project. And at the time, I was I don't know, I was in a place of my career where I felt like I had been doing the same thing for a long time, just a little kind of bored of what I was doing. And, this random email came out about that, Arcadis wanted to invest kind of the power of our expertise to a organization or a project at no cost. And the only kind of criteria was that this money had to go to improving the quality of life. And I, you know, really sparked my interest, and I was able to kind of really dig into it at the time. I had, things weren't super crazy busy, and so I really kind of made it a priority, and I networked like I've never networked before. Networking is not my favorite thing to do. It makes me very uncomfortable. So, but I really wanted to figure out how what we do at Arcadis could be used to improve the quality of life somehow. And I've lived in the Metro Detroit area my entire life, and Detroit is a city that, needs a little bit of help. It is amazing things are happening in Detroit, but there's still things that need some work. And so I thought I'm going to find something in Detroit, and we're going to, figure out how to invest this money to improve the quality of life for people living in Detroit. So I literally talked to everybody I knew. I talked to clients, I talked to coworkers, I talked to friends of friends, I talked to moms and dads on the playground to figure out, who's doing amazing things in Detroit that would need engineering services that Arcadis provide. And I got hooked up with an organization called Life Remodeled, and they are a nonprofit. They do all kinds of things in the city of Detroit. They do big projects every year. And it just so happened that the project that they were undertaking at the time was they were able to lease a school building from the city of Detroit for $1 for 50 years. It was a former elementary school that the city had closed down because they didn't have the population of students to maintain it and keep it open. So this organization came in, and they were trying to renovate it and repurpose it into what they're calling a community innovation center. And really the vision was to have the surrounding community be able to use this place for things like entrepreneurship. So if somebody wanted to start a small business, they could rent space out of this building. Education, so a lot of preschool programs, daycare programs, after school programs for the kids in the neighborhood, right? So they were all displaced out of the school, but to still give them a place within their neighborhood to learn, as well as, really places where just the community could come together. So I walked into this place, I met with the CEO, we talked through what they needed versus what our services were and came up with a proposal. So I submitted the proposal, and I found out in about this time last year from the CEO that my project was selected to be funded. So it was one of two that was selected last year to be funded. The first pro bono project our Cadis had done. So we spent the year last year working through all of the logistical things in terms of contracting, and I built the project team. So that was another cool part of this. So like I said, my expertise is in remediation. None of the project had anything to do with remediation. So I got to learn a lot about other aspects of our business, meet other people on those parts of our business, and build a team to execute the work. So I just got to be the face of the project. I didn't actually get to do any of the work because I don't do any of those types of services, but it was amazing. The organization was so great to work with. We did a town hall from the building. We had people from the organization talk to our company, as well as students and people who are renting space. It was such a great experience. I think I knew it would be inspiring to me, but what I didn't recognize kind of when I embarked on the whole thing was how inspiring it would be to my coworkers. And that was turned out to be. So every time I talked about the project, I would get emails and texts and IMs saying how proud people were to work for Cadis because of the things that we were doing associated with this project. So that was all around awesome. Just an awesome feeling altogether.
That is awesome. It says a lot about the way you approached it, where you went after your network from many different avenues to find a project that would make the most sense for the program. And then you got to be a part of this thing that is really helping your community. So that is awesome. I can totally see why people are so proud of that project and of you. That's great.
It was an amazing experience, and I hope we keep doing that pro bono program and that people apply and get to go through that same experience.
Yeah, I hope so too. I'll be curious to see which ones make it through this year as well.
Yeah. Yep.
You're listening to the Empowering Women podcast. I'm your host, Mel the Engineer, and today we're speaking with Jackie Sailing. Jackie is a chemical engineer and expert in hazardous waste remediation. The Empowering Women podcast is available on iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher, and on our website at empoweringwomenpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. Your role now, you are a community of practice leader. Could you tell us what that means? What are your responsibilities with this role?
Yeah. So I started at Cadis for the first 5 or 6 years. I was very technical, right? The reason I came here was because I was going to learn all these technical things from the people writing the books about it. And all I wanted to do was design stuff and, be a very technical person. Kind of along the way, I started recognizing that I actually have some non-technical skills as well. I can talk to people. I'm a pretty good communicator, and that those could be leveraged in other areas of our business. So maybe in managing people, also in working with clients. And so I kind of moved a little bit away from the technical stuff in terms of solid career path. Obviously, my value to our projects will always be technical. I'm not a project manager and I would be terrible at it. So, when I on a project basis, I was still doing very technical things, but I was also much more open and taking on roles that were not just technical. So, managing people as well as working with clients. And so I did that for another 5 or 6 years. And then really one of the reasons I did that on top of recognizing I had these talents was when I looked at kind of the technical career path and I looked at the people in the roles above me, I thought, like I just don't see myself being able to take on these roles because there's so many qualified people in the pool with me. I just don't see that happening. So interestingly, the role that I had always wanted, when I was in kind of those technical roles, was this remediation practice area lead, but I couldn't figure out how I would get it. I went off and did things very much outside of that realm, and I saw a job posting one day, an internal job posting that kind of remediation position was open, and I thought, huh, I've kind of moved away from leadership within the technical community, but I think it's worth putting my name in the hat. And I was happy actually to see that they were interviewing for that position. Sometimes in the technical world, there's kind of just this you train your successor and they take on your position. And so seeing that it was kind of an open invitation to see who wanted to take that role on, I applied and I got the position. And I think one of the main reasons I got the position was because I had all these other experiences within our organization to bring to this technical role. So long kind of way to come back to your actual question, which was what is the role? I think I'm changing what the role is. I think historically it has been, managing our technical expertise and making sure, we are building the groups and have this bench of technical staff who can execute technical projects, who can support our project proposals, that we are innovating in a technical way. And all of that is still very much important and part of my role. But I'm also trying to bring to the table connecting us with, the staff management piece and making sure we are, even though the people who see themselves as technical, I want them also to recognize that they are important in mentoring and career development of our technical staff and kind of making sure we as a technical community are bringing up the next generation of technical staff. And then also on the client side, making sure that we are connecting with the people within our organizations who are selling work to our clients to make sure what we are building our benches for is actually what our clients need and want. So I think that's how I see the role. I took it on mid last year and I struggled a little bit last year because I was trying to figure out what the role was and what I wanted it to be. And I think kind of that's all the work I did at the end of last year was to really kind of recognize myself that, I don't need somebody to tell me what it should be. I can figure that out myself. I know from a strategic standpoint what makes sense for our organization and kind of hit the ground running this year. And I'm really, really excited about it. We had our first community kickoff call on Tuesday where I got to talk to everybody about kind of my vision for the group and have had such great feedback, really getting people energized about kind of being a technical person in this company and all the things that we can do around that for our staff and our clients.
You mentioned that in the technical world, there can sometimes be this sort of training of successors that happens.
Yep.
And it sounds like in some cases this could be an obstacle because if you're not perhaps the chosen successor, but you want to move into these other positions and grow as a leader, how would you recommend other women navigate something like that?
Yeah, that is hard. And So the thing about training your successor is typically you pick somebody who's very much like yourself. So if, you know, you're a middle-aged man and you're training your successor, you tend to train somebody who's very much like yourself. And that tends to kind of keep women out of that pool. So I think what I would recommend is, first of all, kind of that engagement with leadership to let people know that you are interested in taking on leadership roles and wanting to do more. Um, and talking to people in those roles about their succession plans, right? So if it is somebody who is taking this succession plan approach, because sometimes that's just what it is, talking, being direct, right? Do you have a succession plan? What are you going on to do? And when you do go on to that, who are the people you think could take on the role you have now, particularly for the things that you're interested in? I think that's super helpful. It's not a super comfortable conversation sometimes, but we historically had things here that we called professional development plans, where you could invite as many people as you wanted to sit in on those to talk about kind of what you wanted to do as a career. People thought I was crazy, but I would invite people, all kinds of different people from all different types, parts of our business, just to let them hear about, what I was interested in, what I thought I was good at. Because the other thing is you don't know what kind of opportunities are out there. So, kind of getting connected with people in all aspects and being well rounded so that you can really have the skills you need for a lot of different leadership positions has served me very well, right? When I was just focused on being technical and going into technical leadership, I couldn't get anywhere because there was like this structure and there was no way for me to move up it very quickly. When I recognized that the fastest way to where I wanted to go may have not been a straight line, and that by becoming much more well rounded about our business in general, it was amazing. It all kind of came full circle, and I ended up right where I wanted to be in the beginning. So I think that's another really important thing to think about is well, I think a lot of people listening to this are going to be, you know, engineers, scientists, very linear thinking, but for your career, that might not be the fastest point from point A to point B. It might be a completely, roundabout way to get to where you want to go. And so just casting the widest net you can is going to be very helpful.
I have another question for you. I'm trying to think of the best way to word it. What I want to ask is, what do you value in a leader, and how have you had to change, and what have you maybe learned as you've become a manager of people and a leader?
I think I value things like authenticity and transparency and, you know, communication, being willing to, and really those are the things that when I take those kind of personality tests that I very much am, right? So people know exactly who I am and what I think. I'm kind of a straight shooter in that way, and that's what I appreciate from leaders. I think something that I've had to learn as a leader is the art of building a team so that I can take off my plate the things that are opportunities for others to free time up for me to take on new things. And I think that is so hard to do. Being able to trust people and work with people and kind of get them up to speed on how they need to, think about things and do things so that you can take things off your plate and move on to the next thing. But when you look back on it, and I kind of look back on the teams that I've built over the years, like those are some of my most proud moments, to see the people that I've worked with for years off taking on leadership positions of their own and doing amazing things. I mean, it also makes me sad because it means I don't get to work with them as much, but that's, I think, one of the greatest things about being a leader and building teams like that is seeing the people that you've worked with for so long going on to do great things also.
Can you tell us a specific example of a time when maybe you had those types of concerns? Maybe you were worried about something, and then this person stepped up and really surprised you with how well they did?
Yes. So my favorite example of this is so when I came back from my second maternity leave, that's when I came back and they said, "Hey, I think we're going to make you a staff supervisor, and we're going to assign you this particular person." And she had a reputation for being extremely difficult and having an attitude problem. And, I was terrified. I was like, this girl's going to eat me up. Like, she's going to just like chew me up and spit me out. And so, I didn't know her very well at all. I had never worked with her. Really, the only conversation I had ever had with her was once where she basically said, if I keep having to do this stupid stuff, I'm going to quit. And I thought, oh my gosh. So, I got to start managing her, and through kind of me managing her, I started recognizing what an incredible skill set she had, and recognizing that what she had been branded with as being a bad attitude was not at all a bad attitude. It was basically she commanded authority when she was in the field. It was all these traits where if it had been a man in the field, he would have been a rock star. And instead she was being kind of cast off
Bossy.
as like this problem child, really. And so, we started working together, and, I didn't try to change her, but I just tried to make her aware of the perception. And by me being her manager, I could be an advocate for her, where before she had no advocate, and she was, repetitively branded as a problem child. And I could come back and say, no, she's, crushing it in the field. Contractors do what they're supposed to do when she's out there. She gets the stuff done that needs to get done, and she is an amazing design engineer. Let's give her some more opportunity. So, she grew into be, my go-to for everything, absolutely everything. Now, I mean, that's who I was thinking about when I was saying, I look back now and she's taking on roles, I'm taking big chunks of responsibility off my plate, and she's taking on strategy roles for remediation. She's leading technical communities, and doing amazing things, and has all totally shaken off that kind of stigma she had for a while. I couldn't be more proud of her.
That's an awesome story. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
What would you like to see change in either engineering or remediation as a sort of field and workspace and career path?
Oh, well, I think what would I like to see changed? I think if I mean, I would obviously love, and I think it is changing. So our technical community, I think, very much used to be the good old boys club. And I think, like I said, knowing that the position that I'm in now was actually up for interview and kind of a due process means that, at least kind of in my sphere of vision, those things are changing, because I think the more women in engineering and kind of, in technical career paths that people have to look up to, the more they recognize it's something that they can do too. And I mean, that's another thing I'm pretty passionate about, is making sure people recognize that it isn't easy. And yeah, I do have kids, and I do want to be home for their basketball games or soccer games, and you can it's not easy, but you can do it. And so don't close yourself off to opportunities to grow and to be a leader because you think you can't have both. Again, you're going to have a huge support system, a partner who's willing to kind of work it out with you, but having folks women in the roles, and seeing people like yourself, if you're a woman, is huge. And I know there was a handful of those here at Cadis that I could look to and recognize, all right, they did it, I can too. Recognizing it's not going to be easy, but that it can be done, and it's important.
How would you recommend women support each other, and what would you recommend women maybe cultivate among one another to help each other out along the way?
So I never gave that a whole lot of thought until we started doing our little calls. So as you know, we had a group of women all in this industry, and that you were able to connect everyone together. And we would have monthly calls where we pretty much talked about a whole gamut of things, all of our challenges. One of my favorite things that we did on that call was celebrate each other's successes. And it never even occurred to me to do that until we started doing it. And I realized how awesome that is, because it is so hard when you do something great. You have a party in your head, but it feels so much better when you can share that with a network of people, particularly women who are part of your team and are celebrating your success with you. And so I can't tell you how much that group has meant to me over the last couple of years, and how it's helped me just feel as part of a community of women who are doing things similar to me. And a lot of them also are kind of more junior in their career. So any sort of perspective I can help and pass along, I hope that helps them as well. But just having those women to talk to and bounce ideas off of and celebrate our successes has been really kind of career and life-changing for me. So thank you for that, Mel. And I would encourage people to do that because it is great.
Well, oh my goodness, that makes me blush. That's totally not why I asked that question, but it's a great answer. And I think the celebrate successes of your community is it is a wonderful thing, and I think that's a great sort of point for us to leave off on. So encouraging women to form some bonds with the women around you. It doesn't have to be directly on your team. It can be just other women in organizations you interact with or whatever. And I think it's just as important to be there when someone is having a problem as it is when, they've done a good job and they deserve a high five, know?
Yeah.
Like, way to go.
100%.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time and being willing to share your thoughts and insights with the Empowering Women community.
Thank you so much for having me.
Dear listener, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for downloading the Empowering Women podcast and sharing some time with us. Okay, what other awesomeness do I have for you today? First, we have the Empowering Women in Industry Conference, which is coming up this September 2019 in Chicago. It will be a one-day event, September 26th, at the Chicago Athletic Club Hotel, which, if you've never been there, it's an amazing location. The building is amazing. It will be a really fun place to have a conference. So this is an excellent ground for you to recharge your career pursuits, learn from a variety of powerful women leaders, and a chance to commune and network with other savvy, collaborative women like yourself. So take a look at the agenda and registration at empoweringwomeninindustry.com for details. And I look forward to seeing you there. On our next episode, our guest will be Seppi Saidi. Seppi is one of the most amazing entrepreneurs I've had the chance to speak with, and she also happens to be an engineer. She shares her story of immigration to the United States as a teenager and going to college and starting a business in her home state of North Carolina. It's a great discussion, so stay tuned for that release in a couple of weeks. Finally, I wanted to go back to something Jackie mentioned at the end of our chat. She mentioned a women's call that we did together with several other women, and we've turned that group into a private Facebook group where collaborative and supportive discussions happen. If you're interested in joining, you can find it through me on Facebook. I'm on Facebook as Mel the Engineer, and we call the group Collab Suite. That's spelled COLLABSUITE. So the suite of collaboration. I'd love to connect with you there. You can also find me on Twitter as Mel the Engineer or on Instagram as Collab Suite. Speaking of Twitter, a couple of things. You can follow the Empowering Women group there. The handle is Women in IND. So WOMENININD. And we're planning to do a Twitter chat soon to discuss topics around women in male-dominated careers, fostering support and allyship, things like that. So if you're on Twitter, follow me there and follow Women in Industry, Women in IND, to stay informed on the details for that upcoming chat. That was a lot of information, so thanks for sticking through to the end with me, and until next time.
Thank you for joining us for an episode of the Empowering Women Podcast with Mel the Engineer. If you find the Empowering Women Podcast helpful, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you download your podcasts. Our show is a partnership between Mel the Engineer and the Empowering Women in Industry organization. Learn more by visiting empoweringwomenpodcast.com.